الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وكأي من آية في السماوات والأرض يمرون عليها وهم عنها معرضون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and many are the signs in the heavens and the earth, yet they pass by and pay no heed to them. If we open our eyes and our ears, we will see the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even directly to us. For example, one of the things that softened the heart of Umar radiallahu anhu was that he went to cause trouble to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was praying. And Umar radiallahu anhu hid behind the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and became amazed by the Quran. And so he said, this is a poet. Just like the Quraysh said. And then the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam recited, إنه لقول رسول كريم وما هو بقول شاعر قليلا ما تؤمنون. This is the word of a noble messenger. It is not the word of a poet. Little it is that you believe. So Umar radiallahu anhu said, he's a fortune teller. He knows what I'm thinking. Then the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, ولا بقول كاهن قليلا ما تذكرون. Nor is it the word of a soothsayer. And so just as Umar radiallahu anhu was having these thoughts, the Prophet ﷺ was just reaching these ayahs, as only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could perfectly orchestrate such a moment. Another example is with a scholar, great known scholar, he's a tabi'i. His name is Malik ibn Dinar. May Allah have mercy on him. And he was a renowned pious man of his time. And so one of the people, he was giving a talk, and one of his students asked him, how did you become like this, right? What's your story? And he mentioned his story that nobody ever imagined, that he had been once a harsh and disobedient man. And he related the following story about himself. He said, I was a policeman in my youth, and I was very fond of wine. And he said that he used to sometimes even go in the streets looking for fights. Right? He loved drinking, he loved fighting. And so he said, I drank day and night, and I led a carefree life. He said, I had a daughter named Fatma, and I was very fond of my daughter, and she was also very fond of me. When she began to walk and talk, I loved her all the more, and she was with me all the time. The innocent baby had a strange habit. Whenever she saw a glass of wine in my hands, she would snatch it away and spill it on my clothes. Being fond of her, I did not scold her. As fate would have it, my innocent daughter died when she was 2 years old, and I was stunned with shock and heartsore with grief. One night I was so drunk and went to sleep without performing the Isha prayer. I had the most horrible and terrible dream, in which I saw that it was the day of judgment, with men coming out of graves. And I was one of those who were being driven to the place of assembly. I heard the noise of something following me, and looking back, I saw a huge snake chasing me, close behind. It was a most horrible sight. The snake had blue cat-like eyes. Its mouth was wide open, and was furiously rushing towards me. I ran faster in terror, desperate for my life. The horrible snake was still coming after me and drawing closer. I saw an old man dressed in elegant clothes with rich perfumes. I greeted him saying, Assalamu alaikum, and he returned my greeting. I said, for the sake of Allah, help me in my misery. He said, I am too weak to help you against such a mighty enemy. It is beyond my powers. But you must go on running. Perhaps you may find some help to save you from it. Running wildly, I saw a mountain in front of me and climbed it. But on reaching its top, I saw beyond it the raging fire of hellfire. It was its most horrifying display. I was so terrified by the snake that I ran on till I was afraid that I would fall into the fire. Meanwhile, I heard a voice calling out, 'Get back, for you are not one of them,' meaning you are not from the people of the fire. I came away and began to run in the opposite direction. The snake also turned around and came after me. I saw again the white-robed old man and said to the old man, 'Can't you save me from this python? I asked you before, but you did not help me.' The old man began to cry and said, 'I am too weak to help you against such a mighty snake. But I can tell you that there's a hill nearby where they keep the sacred trusts of the Muslims. If you go up that hill, you might find something of yours kept in trust, which might save you from the snake.' I rushed towards the hill. When I was going to climb the hill, there came forth a host of innocent children with faces bright as the full moon. By this time, I was utterly dispirited, for the snake had drawn very close to me. Now the children called their friends, 'Come out quickly, all of you, for the snake has drawn very close to him.' Hearing this, more children came out in crowds, and among them I saw my own dear daughter, who had died some time ago. She began to weep, exclaiming, 'By Allah, he is my own father.' She darted towards me. I took her to my chest. She lifted her hand and motioned the snake away. The snake went away immediately. Then she gave me a seat and sat in my lap, saying, 'My dear father, has not the time come for the hearts of those who believe to be affected by Allah's reminder?' And she mentioned the ayah in the Quran, أَلَمْ يَأْنِ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. And he said, I was moved to tears and asked her, 'My dear daughter, what was this snake?' She said, 'It was your own evil deeds, which had made it so strong. It was about to push you into the fire.' And I asked, 'And who was the white-robed old man?' She replied, 'Those were your good deeds, and you had made them so weak with your few good deeds that he could not help you.' I asked, 'What are all of you doing on this hill?' She replied, 'We are the children of the Muslims who died in infancy. We shall live here until the day of resurrection, waiting to be reunited with you when you come to us at least, and we shall intercede for you with our Lord.' Malik then woke up screaming, crying out in repentance, saying, 'It is time.' She's saying, 'Isn't it time that you change? Isn't it time that you think about the words of Allah?' So he woke up screaming, and he cried, 'It is time.' So he got up, made wudu, and headed out to pray Fajr in the masjid, seeking to repent and return to Allah. Upon entering the masjid, he found the Imam reciting the very same verse recited by his daughter in the dream. أَلَمْ يَأْنِ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. Has not the time come for the hearts of those who believe to be affected by Allah's reminder? Malik ibn Dinar changed from a person known for his oppression, his alcoholism, and great negligence in his relationship with Allah to being a pious scholar. He saw and he heard the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He wants to guide someone, even if they be someone who sins night and day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them direct messages. One sheikh was saying that he was giving a talk in Egypt, and after he gave the talk, a man came up to him and hugged him and was crying so hard. And the sheikh said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "I used to be the worst person ever. I used to commit adultery and with many women. And one day I was waiting for one of them. And so I started to flip through the channels on the TV. And I saw you on TV. And for some reason, I just stopped. I was thinking, who is this guy with this long beard and this thing on his head?" And he said, "You were talking about adultery. And wallahi, it was as if you were talking to me personally. And I was stuck on that channel. And I just listened and listened. And I broke down crying, and I couldn't stop crying. And I got up and made sujood to Allah. I prostrated to Allah. And at that moment, one of my friends came in with a girl. And he was shocked at what he saw. He couldn't believe it was me. But I had changed. And I told them to leave. And since that day, he changed completely. But what he do? He listened. He realized Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was giving him a warning. One brother I know was saying that he was calling upon Allah, And he said, Ya Allah, give me something to be happy about. And he said nothing was going wrong at the time. Nothing was necessarily going great. Everything was just normal. So he said, Ya Allah, give me something to be happy about. And then shortly thereafter, he opened the Quran and he came upon the ayah, وَقَالُوا الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ الَّذِي أَذْهَبَ عَنَّا الْحَزَنَ. And they will say, praise be to Allah who has kept away from us all causes of sorrow. You're looking something to be happy about? Be happy that there's nothing wrong going on right now. SubhanAllah. I was listening to Mufti Mink a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying the ayah that says, تَكَادُ تَمَيَّزُ مِنَ الْغَيْظِ كُلَّمَا أُلْقِيَ فِيهَا فَوْجٌ سَأَلَهُمْ خَزَنَتُهَا أَلَمْ يَأْتِكُمْ نَذِيرٌ. The ayah says when they are flung into it, they will hear its roaring, and it'll be boiling up as though bursting with rage. Every time a crowd is cast into it, its keepers will ask them, did not a warner come to you? And Mufti Minki was saying that this warning can come in the form of a khatib. It can come in the form of your friend. It can come in the form of your sibling or your parents. And when asked about the warners in the hereafter, they will say, قَالُوا بَلَا قَدْ جَاءَنَا نَذِيرٌ فَكَذَّبْنَا وَقُلْنَا مَا نَزَّلَ اللَّهُ مِنْ شَيْءٍ إِنْ أَنْتُمْ إِلَّا فِي ضَلَالٍ كَبِيرٍ. They will answer, yes, a warner did come to us, but we denied him and said, Allah has not sent down anything. You are in grave error. وَقَالُوا لَوْ كُنَّا نَسْمَعُ أَوْ نَعْقِلُ مَا كُنَّا فِي أَصْحَابِ السَّعِيرِ. And what did they say? They will add, have we only listened or understood, we would not be among the dwellers of the fire. So always listen and take heed to what you hear. Right? Listen up. When someone is speaking to you, listen to what they're saying. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will directly give you a message because of a situation you're in or because you need an answer. I remember one time when I was younger, I had a friend that I used to memorize Quran with, and we promised each other that we wouldn't memorize without each other. And so I went some time without memorizing, and then day after day, I would come across a specific ayah, and I didn't know what it meant. I was just reading it without translation. And one day, I was praying behind a young hafiz who prolonged his prayer during one of the silent prayers. And so I asked him afterwards, I said, what were you reciting? And I asked him to recite it. And he recited the same ayah that I had been reading over and over again. And I had been listening, seeing it, hearing it over and over again in various places. So he recited the same ayah. And so I said to him, what does it mean? And this was the ayah he recited. وَلَا تَجْعَلُوا اللَّهَ عُرْضَةً لِأَيْمَانِكُمْ أَن تَبَرُّوا وَتَتَّقُوا وَتُصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ وَاللَّهُ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. And do not allow your oaths in the name of Allah to become an obstacle to virtue and God consciousness and make peace between people. For Allah is all hearing, all knowing. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling me, stop what you're doing. Who cares if you promised? Get back to memorizing. And I'll never forget this ayah. And this ayah is so meaningful and so beautiful in so many ways. Many times people will say, Wallahi, I will never talk to so-and-so again. Wallahi, I will never enter so-and-so's house again. And then later on the person says, I said Wallahi. Right? I said Wallahi, I'm never going to talk to them, it's too late. I want to go to Ag, I want to go see him again, but I said Wallahi. But what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically say? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't make me an excuse. Don't use the name of Allah to keep from doing good and keep from doing what is right. Right? And fixing between people. So, do what's right, and nothing should stand in your way of doing what is right. Nothing should stand in your way of uniting people. أقول هذا القول واستغفركم إن الله غفور رحيم. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. I remember one time, Imam Siraj Wahaj was at a major conference. And if you've been to Ikna or Isna, you know that the main sessions have thousands of people. And he said something I'll never forget. He said, there are so many of you here today, and every one of you has a need. And I hope and pray that although there are thousands of you, that I will say something to benefit each and every one of you. And I truly believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the people the ability and inspires them to say things to individually benefit the people. Many times, a masjid will call me up and say, our khatib cannot make it. Can you give the khutbah today? And literally sometimes it'll be like 1 hour, 2 hours before the khutbah, and they'll just call me and be like, hey, can you give the khutbah today? Right? And so obviously I'm not prepared. I don't know what I'm going to talk about. And at home I have binders and binders of khutbahs that I've given in the past. And I probably have 100 or so khutbahs that are just in paper form in these binders. And so I'll pick one with only a couple of hours to spare. And nearly every time after I give the khutbah, which I had randomly picked, someone will come up to me and say, thank you. I really needed to hear that. And I truly believe, without a doubt, because of how many times it has happened, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired me to choose that khutbah. Or that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired and put things in motion for that person to come and listen to that khutbah. It's happened so many times. I've almost come to expect it. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put things in motion so that that person will go and listen to me. Wallahu a'lam. At one point, I used to prepare new khutbahs twice a month, as I used to give the khutbah at Westchester twice a month. So I always had to, prepare something new. And so when I would pick a topic a couple of days in advance, I would attend Isha at the masjid, and a hadith would be read afterwards. And week after week after week, the hadith that was read was related to the topic that I had chosen to speak about. And it went on for so long that I would anticipate and wait for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give me material for my khutbah through some means. Whether it be a talk that I was listening to, or whether it be a hadith that was just read after Isha, or whether it be the halaqah that was decided to speak about, week after week after week, I would choose a topic, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would set things in motion so that I could have material for my khutbah. It's happened so many times, I would actually wait for it. And I want to end with an amazing instance in which only the seer of the unknown can orchestrate such a thing. A brother from America, he was visiting a Muslim country. And he went out during the day and he saw a guy selling Quran tapes. So he decided to stop and buy some. And he said to the guy selling the tapes, he said, just give me any. Just give me a bunch of tapes. You pick. And so the guy picked out his favorite surahs and the brother bought them. Again, at random. So later on that night, the brother got up to pray Fajr in the masjid. And on his way to the masjid, 4 or 5 young kids surrounded him. And they said, hey, how you doing? Right? And they were patting him and patting his sides. And then they walked away. And the brother heard them say as they were walked away, I swear I heard him speak English today. And the brother continued on his way to the masjid. Prayed, came home, and randomly picked out one of the Quran tapes he had brought earlier that day. And he picked out Surah Al-Ma'idah. And 11 ayahs later, he hears this. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ هم قوم أن يبسطوا إليكم أيديهم فكف أيديهم عنكم واتقوا الله وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنون. O believers, remember Allah's favor upon you when a people sought to harm you, but He held their hands back from you. Be mindful of Allah, and in Allah let the believers put their trust. He knew at that point that those kids had every intention to harm him, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept their hands back. At random, he bought those Quran tapes. At random, he picked that Quran tape to listen to. So brothers and sisters, remember, وَكَأَيٍّ مِّنْ آيَةٍ مِّن فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ يَمُرُّونَ عَلَيْهَا وَهُمْ عَنْهَا مُعْرِضُونَ. And many are the signs in the heavens and the earth, yet they pass by and pay no heed to them. Brothers and sisters, open your eyes, open your ears, and you will see that Allah is communicating with you in different ways. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase us in consciousness of Him and increase us in Iman and make us all aware of all the signs around us, whether they be in His creation or whether they be direct. May